All right, so gonna do some more reading again today. Um, I took yesterday off, so I am a day behind in my reading schedule, but that is fine. I am almost halfway done with the book, so hoping to knock that out in a relatively short time frame. And I am being nondescript for, I don't know, personal reasons that I don't want to get into right now. But what I will say is that the temperature in the room is a little hot and cold, so I'll probably be switching between having my blanket on and off. Also, um, for the person who I intend on showing this to exclusively, even though I'm going to be making all these public, I do have two rings on. One is a Phantom Thief mask, specifically Joker from Persona 5, and I have a Sword Art Online ring of Kirito's two swords. I do not remember the name of his swords, but I I have seen at least the first arc of the show. Anyway, I have my own personal reasons for wearing those. Not particularly today, but just in general as we near more into the reading. I know none of that is terribly important, and that none of you actually care about really any of that because you're here for me to read Fangirl. Anyway, one thing that we must do as tradition is notate that there is, in fact, a corgi plush over here with a fez on his head because fezzes are cool. So, as of course, that's how we begin this. And now we are resuming chapter 12, or as the book just calls it, 12. So, without further ado, I'm going to position myself. If you're wondering my positioning, the lighting beams from that part of the room exclusively, and I'm reading early enough in the day where I actually get some daylight, but uh, since my eyes can be kind of sensitive, I like to do it where I have the light beaming directly onto the book, so that's why I sit this way. Anyway, 12. It was too cold to wait outside before fiction writing, so Kath found a bench inside Andrew's hall and sat with one leg tucked beneath her, leaning back against the cream-colored wall. She took out her phone and opened a fic she had been reading. She was too nervous to study. Kath never read other people's Simon/Biles anymore. She didn't want to unconsciously mimic another author or steal someone's ideas. So when she did read fic, it was always about Penelope. Sometimes Penelope/Agatha, sometimes Penelope/Micah, the American exchange student who only appeared in book 3. Sometimes just Penelope, all on her own, having adventures. It felt like an act of open rebellion to be reading fan fiction while she sat in the English building, waiting to see Professor Piper for the first time since their talk. Kath had actually considered skipping class today, but she figured that would just make it even more painful to face Professor Piper next time. It's not like Kath could skip class for the rest of the semester. Better to just get it over with. Kath already faced Ren, and that hadn't gone nearly so badly as she expected. They'd eaten lunch together twice this week, and neither of them had brought up the scene at Muggsy's. Maybe Ren had just been too drunk had been too drunk to remember the details. Courtney didn't seem to get that they were avoiding the subject. That girl had been subtly a part of Spencer's gift shop. Hey, Kath, Courtney said at lunch. Who was that cute blonde boy you were with Friday night? Was that your hot librarian? No, Kath said. That's just Levi. Her roommate's boyfriend, Ren said, uh, stirring her vegetable soup. Ren seemed tired. She wasn't wearing mascara, and her eyelashes looked pale and stubby. Oh, Courtney stuck out her bottom lip. Too bad. He was super cute. Farm boy. How could you tell he's a farm boy? Kath asked. Carhartt. They both said at once. What? His coat, Wren explained. All the farm boys wear Carhartt. Trust your sister on this, Courtney giggled. She knows all the farm boys. He's not my hot librarian, Cass said. No one is my hot librarian, she thought now, losing her place in the fic she was reading. No one is my hot anything. And besides, Kath still wasn't sure whether Nick was actually hot or whether he just projected hotness, specifically in her direction. Someone sat down next to her on the bench, and Kath glanced up from her phone. Nick tilted his chin up in greeting. Think of the devil, she said. Then she wished she hadn't. You thinking about me? I was thinking of the devil, Cass said stupidly. Idle brains, Nick said, grinning. He was wearing a thick navy blue turtleneck sweater that made him look like he was serving on a Soviet battleship, like even more so than usual. So, what did Piper want to talk to you about last week? Nothing much. Cass' stomach was such a mess today, she hardly felt it wrench. Nick unwrapped the piece of bubble gum and set it on his tongue. Was it about taking her advanced class? No, you have to make an appointment to talk to her about it, he said, chewing. It's like an interview. I'm meeting with her next week. I'm hoping she'll give me a teaching assistantship. Yeah? Cass sat up a little straighter. That'd be great. You'd be great at that. Nick gave her a sheepish smile. Yeah, well, I wish I would have talked to her about it before the last assignment. It was my worst grade of the semester. Really? It was hard to make eye contact with Nick. His eyes were almost buried under his eyebrows. You had to dig into his face. Mine too, Cass said. She said that my writing was overly slick and impenetrable, he sighed. She said worse about mine. Guess I've gotten used to writing with backup, Nick said, still smiling at her, still sheepish. Codependent, Cass said. Nick snapped his gum at her. Were you writing tonight? Kath nodded and looked at her phone. Reagan isn't here, Cass said, already choosing the door. Levi leaned into the door with his shoulder. I think we're past that, he said, walking into the room. Kath shrugged and went back to her desk. Levi flopped down on her bed, Levi flopped down on her bed. He was dressed in black. He must have just gotten off work. She frowned at him. I still can't believe you work at Starbucks, she said. What's wrong with Starbucks? It's a big, faceless corporation. He raised a good, nurtured brow. So far, they've let me keep my face. Kath went back to her laptop. I like my job, he said. I see the same people every day. I remember their drinks. They like that I remember their drinks. I make them happy, and when they leave, it's like being a bartender, but you don't have to deal with the drunks. Speaking of, how's your sister? Kath stopped typing and looked at him. Fine. She's fine. Back to normal, I guess. Thanks, for driving me and everything. Kath had told Levi thank you for Friday night, but she felt like she owed him a few more. Forget about it. Did you guys have a big talk? We don't have big talk, she said, holding two fingers to her temple. We're twins. We have telepathy. Levi grinned. Really? Kath laughed. No, not even a little bit. Not even a little bit? No. She went back on typing. What are you working on? A biology essay. No secret, dirty fan fiction? Kath stopped again. My fan fiction is neither a secret, obviously, nor is it dirty. He ran his fingers through his hair, making it stick up in the mellow, in sandy blonde plumes. Shameless. What do you put in your hair to make it stick up like that? She asked. He laughed. He laughed and did it again. Nothing. Nothing? Something. I think it does that because I don't wash it. She grimaced. Ever? Every month or so, maybe. Kath wrinkled her nose and shook her head. That's disgusting. No, it isn't. I still rinse it. Still disgusting. It's perfectly clean, he said. He leaned toward her, and his hair touched her arm. This this room was this room was too small. Smell. She sat back. I'm not smelling your hair. Well, I'll smell it. He pulled a piece down his long forehead. It came to the bridge of his nose. It smells like freshly mown clover. I don't think you mow clover. Can you imagine how sweet it would smell if you did? Levi sat back, which was a relief, until he picked up her pillow and started rubbing it on his head. Oh, God, she said. Stop. That's such a violation. Levi laughed, and she tried to grab her pillow from him. He held it to his chest with both hands. Cather, don't call me that. Read me some of your secret dirty fanfiction. It's not dirty. Read me some anyway. She let go of her pillow. Already he'd probably already filthed it beyond redemption. Why? Because I'm curious, he said, and I like stories. You just want to make fun of me. I won't, he said. I promise. That's what you and Reagan do when I'm not here, right? Make fun of me? Play with my commemorative bus? Do you have a stupid nickname for me? His eyes sparkled. Cather, I don't exist to amuse you, you know. One, are you sure? Because you do. And two, we don't make fun of you very much anymore. And three, he was counting on his fingers and his cheeks were twitching, and it was making Kath laugh. Three, he said, I won't make fun of you to anyone but you. From now on, if you'll just once, right now, read me some of your fanfiction. Kath gave him a level stare, a mostly level stare. She was still giggling a little and and blinking hard, and occasionally looking up at the ceiling. You're curious, she said. He nodded. She rolled her eyes again and turned on her laptop. Why not? She didn't have anything to lose, but yes, but that's not the point. Part of her argued, what do you have to gain? It's not like Levi was going to be impressed by her fanfiction. Uh, Entertained wasn't the same as impressed. He already thought she was a weirdo, and this was going to make her seem much weirder. Did the bearded lady get excited when cute guys came to her freak show? Kath shouldn't want this kind of attention, and Levi wasn't even that cute. His forehead was lined even when he wasn't making a face. Sun damage, probably. Okay, she said. He grinned and started to say something. Shut up. She held up her left hand. Don't make me change my mind. Just let me finish something. She opened the Simon slash Bass folder on her desktop and scrolled through it, looking for something suitable. Nothing too romantic or dirty. Maybe, yeah, this one will do. All right, she said. You know how in the sixth book, which one is that? Simon Snow and the Six White Hairs. Right, I've seen that movie. Okay, so Simon stays at school during Christmas break because he's trying to find the fifth hair, and because his dad has been kidnapped by monsters in creepy costumes. So no happy Christmas dinner at the Snow House. They're they're called Queen's Ogres, Cass said, and Simon still doesn't know that the mage is his dad. Uh, how can he not know? Levi demanded. Kath was encouraged by how indignant he sounded. It was so obvious. Every Why does the mage show up every time something important happens and get all weepy talking about how he knew a woman once with Simon's eyes? I know, Kath said. It's lame, but I think Simon wants so badly for the mage to be his dad that he won't let himself accept the overwhelming evidence. If he were wrong, it would ruin him. Basil knows, Levi said. Oh, Baz totally knows. I think Penelope knows too. Penelope Bunce, Levi grinned. If I were Simon, I'd be all Penelope all the time. Ick. She's like a sister to him. Not like any of my sisters. Anyway, Cass said, this story takes place during the Christmas break. Okay, Levi said. Got it. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the wall, holding Cass' pillow. All right, I'm ready. Kath turned to the computer and cleared her throat, then felt stupid about clearing her throat. Then glanced back at Levi one more time. She couldn't believe she was doing this. Was she really doing this? If you keep pacing like that, Baz said, I'm going to curse your feet into the floorboards. Simon ignored him. He was thinking about the clues he'd found so far, trying to see a pattern. The rabbit shape the rabbit-shaped stone in the ritual tower, the stained glass hair in the cathedral, the sigil on the drawbridge. Snow, Baz shouted. A spellbook sailed past Simon's house. What are you thinking? Simon asked, genuinely surprised. Flying books and curses were a fair game in the hallways and classrooms and, well, everywhere else, but if Baz tried to hurt him inside the roommates, uh, anathema, Simon said, you'll be expelled. Which is why I missed. I know the rules, Baz muttered, rubbing his eyes. Did you know, Snow, that if your roommate dies during the school year, they give you top marks just out of sympathy? That's a myth, Simon said. Lucky for you, I'm already getting top marks. Simon stopped pacing and to really look at his roommate. Normally, he liked to pretend that Baz wasn't there. Normally, Baz wasn't there, unless he was spying or plotting. Baz hated to be in their room. He said it smelled like good intentions. But Baz hardly left the room in the last 2 weeks. Simon hadn't seen him in the caf or at football. He'd seemed drawn and distracted in class, and his school shirts, usually pressed in bright white, were looking as manky as Simon's. Because he's a vampire, Simon, Levi interjected. In this story, Cass said, Simon doesn't know yet. He's a vampire, Levi shouted at her laptop, and he's hunting you. He stays up all night, watching you sleep, trying to decide whether to eat you whole or one chunk at a time. Simon can't hear you, Cass said. Levi sat back, hugging the pillow again. They are kind of gay, aren't they? Uh, with all the watching each other sleep and the ignoring Penelope. They're obsessed with each other, Cass said, as if as if this were one of life's absolute givens. Simon spends the entire fifth book following Baz around and describing his eyes, like a thesaurus entry for gray. I don't know, Levi said. It's hard for me to get my head around. It's hard for me to get my head around. It's like hearing that Harry Potter is gay, or Encyclopedia Brown. That made Kath laugh out loud. Yeah, laugh out loud. Big Encyclopedia Brown fan? Shut up. My dad used to read them to me. He closed his eyes again. Okay, go on. Is something wrong? Simon asked, then couldn't believe he'd asked it. It's not like he really cared. If Baz said yes, Simon would likely say, good. Still, it seemed cruel not to ask. Baz may Baz may have been the most despicable human being Simon ever met, but he was still a human being. I'm not the one pacing the room like a hyperactive madman, Baz mumbled, his elbows on his desk, his head resting in his hands. You seem down or something. Yes, I'm down. I'm down, Snow. Baz raised his head and spun his chair toward Simon. He really did look terrible. His eyes were sunken and shot with blood. I've spent the last 6 years living with the most self-centered, insufferable prat to carry a wand. And now, instead of celebrating Christmas Eve with my beloved family, drinking mulled cider and eating toasted cheese, instead of warming my hands at the ancestral hearth, I'm playing a tortured extra in the bloody Simon Snow show. Simon stared at him. It's Christmas Eve? Yes, Baz groaned. Simon walked around his bed clumsily. He hadn't realized it was Christmas Eve. He thought that Agatha would have called him, or Penelope. Levi sighed. Penelope. Kath read on. Maybe his friends were waiting for Simon to call them. He hadn't even bought them gifts. Lately, nothing had seemed important as finding the white hairs. Simon clenched his square jaw. Nothing was as important. The whole school was in danger. There must be some pattern he wasn't seeing. He quickened his step. The stone in the tower, the stained glass window, the sigil, the mage's book. I give up, Baz whined. I'm going to go drown myself in the moat. Tell my mother I always knew she loved me best. Simon stopped pacing at Baz's desk. Do you know how to get down to the moat? I'm not actually going to kill myself, Snow. Sorry to disappoint. No, it's just you use the puns sometimes, don't you? Everyone does. Not me, Simon says. I can't swim. Really? Baz hissed with a hint of his old vigor. Well, you wouldn't want to swim in the moat anyway. The merewolves would get you. Why don't they bother the boats? Silver, punt bowls, and praises. Will you take me out on one? It was worth a try. The moat was one of the only places left in the school that Simon hadn't searched. You want to go punting with me? Boz asked. Yes, Simon says, tilting up his chin. Will you do it? Why? I want to see what it's like. I've never done it. Why does it matter? It's Christmas Eve, and you obviously don't have anything better to do. Apparently, even your parents can't stand to be around you. Baz stood suddenly, his gray eyes glinting dangerously in the shadow of his brow. You know nothing about my parents. Simon stepped back. Baz had a few inches out of now, for now, and when Baz made an effort, he could seem dangerous. Look, I'm sorry, Simon said. Will you do it? Fine, Baz said. The flare of anger and energy had already faded. Get your cloak. Kath glanced over at Levi. His eyes were still closed. After a second, he opened one. Is it over? No, she said. I just didn't know if you wanted me to go on. I mean, you get the idea. Levi closed his eyes and shook his head. Don't be stupid. Keep going. Kath looked at him for another second. At the lines in his forehead and the scruff of dark blonde hair along his jaw. His mouth was small but bowed, like a doll's. She wondered if he had trouble opening it wide enough to eat apples. Your madness must be catching, Baz complained, untangling a rope. The boats were stacked and tied off for the winter. Simon hadn't been thinking about the cold. Shut up, he said. Anyway, it'll be fun. That's the point, Snow. Since when do we have fun together? I don't even know what you do for fun. Uh, Teeth whitening, I assume. Unnecessary dragon slaying. We've had fun before, Simon argued, because he didn't know how to do anything with Baz, but argue, and because surely Baz was wrong. In 6 years, they must have shared some fun. There was that time in third year when we fought the Chimera together. I was trying to lure you there, Baz said. I thought I'd get away from the thing before it attacked. Still, it was fun. I was trying to kill you, Snow. And on that note, are you sure you want to do this alone with me on a boat? What if I shove you over? I could let the werewolf solve all my problems. Simon twisted his lips to one side. I don't think he will. And why ever not? Baz cast off the last of the ropes. If you really wanted to get rid of me, Simon said thoughtfully, you would have by now. No one else has had as many opportunities. I don't think you'd hurt me unless it played into one of your grand plans. This could be my grand plan, Baz said, shoving off one of the punts free with a grunt. No, Simon said. This one is mine. Alistair Crowley. Snow, are you going to help me with this or what? They stared. They carried the boat down to the water, Baz swinging the punt pole lightly. Simon noticed for the first time the silver plating at one end. Snowball fights, he said, following Baz's lead as they settled the boat in the water. What? We've had lots of snowball fights. Those are fun. And food fights. That time I spilled gravy up your nose. And I put your wand in the microwave. You destroyed the kitchen, Simon laughed. I thought it would just swell up like a marshmallow peep. There was no reason to think that. Baz shrugged. Don't put a wand in the microwave. Lesson learned. Unless it's Snow's wand and Snow's microwave. Simon was standing on the dock now, shivering. He really hadn't considered how cold it would be out there, or the fact that he'd actually have to get into a boat. He glanced down at the cold, black water of the moat and thought he saw something heavy and dark moving below the surface. Come on, Baz. Come on. Baz was already in the punt. He jabbed Simon's shoulder with the pole. This is your grand plan, remember? Simon set his jaw and stepped in. The boat dipped beneath his weight, and he scrabbled forward. Baz laughed. Maybe this will be fun, he said, sinking the pole into the water and shoving off. Baz looked perfectly comfortable up there, a long dark shadow at the end of the punt, as elegant and as graceful as ever. He shifted into the moonlight and um, he shifted into the moonlight, and Simon watched him take a slow, deep breath. He looked more alive than he had in weeks. But Simon hadn't come out here to watch Baz. God knows he had plenty of other opportunities. Simon turned, looking around the moat, taking in the carvings along the stone walls and the tile at the water's edge. I should have brought a lantern, he said. Too bad you're not a magician, Baz replied, conjuring a ball of blue flame and tossing it at Simon's head. Simon ducked and caught it. Baz had always been better than he was at fire magic. Show off. The tile glittered in the light. Can we get closer to the wall? Simon asked. Baz obliged smoothly. Up close, Simon could see where a mosaic that stretched beneath the water, wizard battles, unicorns, symbols, and glyphs. Who knew how far down it went? Baz guided them slowly along the wall, and Simon held the light up, gradually leaning over the side of the boat to get a better look. He forgot about Baz in a way he normally wouldn't allow himself to do outside the protection of the room. Simon didn't even notice at first when the boat drifted to a stop. When he looked back, Baz stepped toward him in the punt. He was curled above Simon, washed blue by his own conjured fire, his teeth bared and his face thick with decision and disgust. The door flew open. Reagan always kicked it in as soon as she unlocked it. There were dusty shoe prints all over the outside of their door. She swept in, dropping her bags on the floor. Hey, she said, glancing over at them. Quiet, Levi whispered. Cass reading fan fiction. Really? Reagan looked at them with more interest. Not really, Cass said, shutting the laptop. Just finished. No, Levi leaned over and opened it. You can't just stop in the middle of a vampire attack. Vampires, huh? Reagan said. Sounds pretty exciting. I've got to finish my biology essay, Cass said. Come on, Reagan turned to Levi. Plant Fizz, are we doing this? We're doing it, he grumbled, sliding off Cass' bed. Can I use your phone? He asked her. Kath handed him her phone and he punched a number in. His back pocket started playing a Led Zeppelin song. To be continued, he said, handing it back to her. Solid? Sure, Cass said. Library? Reagan asked. Highway diner. Levi picked up his backpack and opened the door. Fan fiction makes me crave corned beef hash. See ya, said Reagan to Kath. See ya, Kath said. Levi ducked his head back at the last minute to flash her a wide grin. If you wanted to meet the other Star Trek fans in 1983, you'd have to join fan clubs by mail or meet up with the other Trekkies at conventions. When readers fell for Simon in 2001, the fan community was as close as the nearest keyboard. Simon Snow fandom exploded on the internet and just keeps exploding. There are more sites and blogs devoted to Simon there are more sites and blogs devoted to Simon than to the Beatles and Lady Gaga combined. You'll find fan stories, fan art, fan videos, plus endless discussion and conjecture. Loving Simon isn't something one does alone or once a year at a convention. For thousands of fans of all ages, loving Simon Snow is nothing less than a lifestyle. Jennifer Magnuson, Tribe of Simon, Newsweek, October 28th, 2009. I'm going to pause for a little bit, then I will resume. All right. Resume. Well, the video seems a bit choppier for some reason. Anyway. This should do, right? Right. Yeah, it's still too warm. Okay. 13. Kath wasn't trying to make new friends here. In some cases, she was actively trying not to make friends, though she usually stopped short of being rude. Uptight, tense, and mildly misanthropic? Yes. Rude? No. But everyone around Kath, everybody in her classes and in the dorms, really was trying to make friends, and sometimes she'd have to be rude not to go along with it. Campus life was just so predictable. One routine layered over another. You saw the same people while you were brushing your teeth, and a different set of people, and a different set of the same people in each class. The same people passing you every day in the halls. Pretty soon you were nodding and then you were saying hello. And eventually someone would start a conversation, and you just had to go along with it. What was Kath supposed to say? Stop talking to me? It's not like she was Reagan. That's how she ended up hanging out with TJ and Julian in American history, and Katie, a non traditional student with two kids in political science. There was a nice girl in her fiction writing class named Kendra, and she and Kath both studied in the Union for an hour on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. So it made sense to sit at the same table. None of these friendships spread into Kath's personal life. TJ and Julian weren't invited to her. TJ and Julian weren't inviting her to smoke weed with them or to come over and play Batman Arkham City on PlayStation 3. No one ever invited Kath to go out to parties except for Reagan and Levi, who felt more like sponsors than friends. Not even Nick, whom Kath was writing with regularly now, twice a week. Meanwhile, Ren's social calendar was so crowded, Kath felt like even calling her sister was an interruption. Kath had thought they were over the bar-tastrophe, but Ren was acting even more irritable and remote than she'd been at the start of the year. When Kath did try to call, Ren was always Ren was always on her way out, and she wouldn't tell Kath where she was going. I don't need you to show up with a stomach pump, Ren said. In some ways, it had always been like this. Ren had always been the social one, the friendly one, the one who got invited to oh God, I cannot pronounce this word. Quinceañeras. I probably butchered that. And birthday parties. But before, in junior high and high school, everyone knew that if you invited Ren, you got Kath. They were a package deal, even at dances. There were 3 years worth of photos taken at every homecoming and prom of Kath and Ren standing with their dates under an archway of balloons or in front of a glittery curtain. They were a package deal, period, since always. They'd even gone to therapy together after their mom left, which seemed weird now that Kath thought about it, especially considering how differently they reacted. Ren was acting out, Kath acting in, violently, desperately, in Journey to the Center of the Earth. In their third grade teacher, they were always in the same class, although elementary school thought they must be upset about the wait, their third grade teacher, they were always in the same class all throughout elementary school, thought they must be upset about the terrorists because their mom left on September 11th. The September 11th. Kath still found this incredibly embarrassing. It was like their mom was so self-centered she couldn't be trusted not to desecrate a national tragedy with her own issues. Kath and Ren had been sent home from school early that day, and their parents were already fighting when they got there. Her dad was upset, and her mom was crying, and Kath thought at first it was because of the World Trade Center. Their teacher had told them about the airplanes, but that wasn't it. Not exactly. Her mom kept saying, I'm done, or I'm just done. I'm living the wrong life. Kath went out and sat on the back steps, and Wren sat beside her, holding her hand. The fight went on, and when the president flew over their heads that afternoon on the way to the Air Force Base, the only plane in the sky, the only plane in the sky, Kath thought that maybe the whole world was going to end. Her mom left for good a week later, hugging both the girls on the front porch, kissing their cheeks again and again, promising that she'd seen them both soon, that she just needed some time to feel better, to remember who she really was, which didn't make any sense to Kath and Wren. You're our mom. Kath couldn't remember anything that happened next. She remembered crying a lot at school, hiding with Wren in the bathroom during recess, holding hands on the bus, Wren scratching a boy who said they were gay in the eye. Wren didn't cry. She stole things and hid them under her pillow. When their dad had changed their sheets for the first time, not until after Valentine's Day, he found Simon Snow pencils and lip smackers in a Britney Spears CD. Then, in 1 week, Wren cut some other girl's dress with safety scissors, and Kath wet her pants during social studies because she was scared to raise her hand and ask for a bathroom pass. Their teacher called their dad and gave him a business card for child psychologist. Their dad didn't their dad didn't tell the therapist their mom was gone. He didn't even tell grandma until summer break. He was so sure she was going to come back, and he was such a disaster. They were all three such a disaster. It had taken years to put themselves back together, and so what if some things didn't get put back in their right place? At least they couldn't hold themselves up most of the time. Kath closed her biology book and reached for her laptop. Um, for some reason, I thought the recording stopped it, and anyway, sorry, let me go back here. Uh, sorry, I'm just going to go back to the top of the page. They were all three such a disaster. It had taken years to put themselves back together, and so what if some things didn't get put back in the right place? At least they could hold themselves up most of the time. Kath closed her biology book and reached for her laptop. Reading it was too quiet. She needed to write. It startled her when her phone rang. She stared at it for a second before she answered, trying to recognize the number. Hello? Hey, it's Levi. Hi? There's a party at my house tonight. There's always a party at your house. So you'll come? Reagan's coming. What would I do at your party, Levi? Have fun, he said, and she could hear that he was smiling. Kath tried not drink, not smoke, not get high. You could talk to people. I don't like to talk to drunk people. Just because people will be drinking doesn't mean they'll be drunk. I won't be drunk. I don't need to go to a party to talk to you. Did Reagan tell you to invite me? No, not exactly. Not like that. Have fun at your party, Levi. Wait, Kath. What? She said, like she was hassled, but she wasn't. Not really. What are you doing? Trying to write. What are you doing? Nothing, he said. Just got off work. Maybe you should finish reading me that story. What story? She knew what story. The Simon Snow story. Vampire Bowes was just about to attack Simon. You want me to read to you over the phone? Why not? I'm not going to read to you over the phone. There was a knock at the door. Kath eyed it suspiciously. More knocking. I know that's you, she said into the phone, Levi laughing. She got up and opened the door, ending the call. You're ridiculous. I brought you coffee, he said. He was wearing all black, black jeans, black sweater, black leather work boots, and holding two Christmassy red cups. I don't really drink coffee, their previous encounters notwithstanding. That's okay. These are more like melted candy bars. Which do you want, gingerbread latte or eggnog? Eggnog? Eggnog reminds me of mucus, she said. Me too, but in a good way. He held out his hands. Gingerbread. Kath took the cup and smiled in resignation. You're welcome, Levi said. He sat in her bed and smiled expectantly. You're serious. She sat down at her desk. Come on, Kath, you don't write these stories so that people can. You don't write these stories? Yeah. Don't you write these stories so that people can enjoy them? I write them so that people will read them. I'll send you a link. Don't send me a link. I'm not much of an internet person. Kath felt her eyes get big. She was about to take a sip of her coffee, but stopped. How do you not like the internet? That's like saying I don't like things that are convenient and easy. I don't like having access to all mankind's recorded discoveries at my fingertips. I don't I don't like light and knowledge. I like knowledge, he said. You're not a book person, and now you're not an internet person. What does that leave you? Levi laughed. Life, work, class, the great outdoors, other people. Other people, Kath replied, shaking her head and taking a sip. There are other people on the internet. It's awesome. You get all the benefits of other people without the body odor and the eye contact. Levi kicked her Levi kicked her chair. He could reach it without stretching. Kath, read me your fanfiction. I want to know what happens next. She opened her computer slowly, as if she were still thinking about it, as if there were any way she was going to say no. Levi wanted to know what happened next. That question was Kath's Achilles' heel. She opened the story she'd been reading to him. It was something she'd written last year for a Christmas fic festival. Deck the holes with uh, Simon and Baz. Kath's fic had won 2 awards: Tastes Like Canon and Best in Snow. Where did we leave off? She said, mostly to herself. Baz's teeth were bared, and his face, and his face. Baz's teeth were bared, and his face with Phil. Why can't I read this? And his face was filled with disgust and decision. Kath found the spot in the story. Wow, she said. Good memory. Levi was smiling. He kicked her chair again. Okay, she said. So they're in a boat, and Simon is leaning over, looking at the tiles on the moat wall. Levi closed his eyes. Kath cleared her throat. When he looked back, Baz had stepped toward him in the punt. He was curled above Simon, washed blue by his own conjured fire, his teeth bared and his face thick with decision and disgust. Baz held the pole just over Simon's face, and before Simon could reach his wand or whisper a spell, Baz was driving the pole forward over Simon's shoulder. The boat shook, and there was a gurgling howl, a frenzied splash from the water. Baz raised the pole and drove it down again, his face as cold and cruel as Simon had ever seen it. His wide lips were shining, and he was practically growling. Simon himself still while the boat rocked. Simon held himself still while the boat rocked. When Baz stepped back again, Simon slowly sat up. Did it kill you? He asked quietly. No, Baz said. I should have. It should have been. It should have known better than to other. Man, it should. It should. It should know better than to bother the boats, and you should know better than to lean into the moat. Why are the merwolves in the moat anyway? Simon flushed. This is a school. A school run by a madman. Something I've been trying to explain to you for 6 years. Don't talk that way about the mage. Where's your mage now, Simon? Baz asked softly, looking up at the old fortress. He looked tired again, his face blue and shadowed in the moonlight. His eyes practically ringed in black. And what are you looking for anyway? He asked, waspishly, rubbing his eyes. Maybe if you told me, I could help you find it, and then we could go inside and avoid death by drowning, freezing, or torn jugular. Simon weighed the risks. Usually, when Simon was this far along a quest, Baz had already sniffed out his purpose and was setting a trap to foil him. But this time, Simon hadn't told anyone what he was doing, not even Agatha, not even Penelope. The anonymous letter he had told Simon to seek out his help. It said that the mission was too dangerous to carry out on his own, and that's exactly why Baz hadn't wanted to involve his friends. But putting Baz at risk, well, that wasn't so distasteful. It's dangerous, Simon said sternly. Oh, I'm sure. Danger is your middle name, etc. Simon Oliver Danger Snow. How do you know my middle name? Simon asked warily. Great Crimea. What part of 6 years is lost on you? I know which shoe you put on first. I know that your shampoo smells like apples. My mind is fairly bursting with worthless Simon Snow trivia. Don't you know mine? Your what? My middle name, Baz said. Morgan's tooth. He was stroppy. It's Basilton, right? Quite right, you great thumping idiot. That was a trick question. Simon turned back to the mosaic. What are you looking for? Baz demanded again, snarling with his teeth like an animal. This was something Simon had learned about Baz in 6 years. He could turn from peevish to dangerous in half a heartbeat. But Simon still hadn't learned not to rise to the bait. Rabbits, he blurted out. I'm looking for rabbits. Rabbits? Baz looked confused, caught mid-snarl. 6 white hairs. Why? I don't know, Simon shouted. I just am. I got a letter. There are 6 white hairs in school grounds, and they lead to something. To what? I don't know. Something dangerous. And I don't suppose, Baz said, leaning against the pole, resting his forehead on the wood, that you know who sent it. No. It could be a trap. There's only one way to find out. Simon wished he could stand and face Baz without tipping the boat. He hated the way Baz was talking down to him. You really think that, Baz coughed, don't you? You really think that the only way to sort out whether something is dangerous is to barrel into it, or uh, some. The only way to sort out whether something is dangerous is dangerous. The sentence reads weird. All right. You really think the only way to sort out whether something is dangerous is to barrel into it? What else would you suggest? You could ask your precious mage for starters. You could run it past your swatty friend. Her brain is so enormous it pushes her ears out like a monkey's. Maybe she could shed some light. Simon yanked on Baz's cloak and made him lose balance. Don't talk about Penelope like that. All right. Before we turn the page, I just wanted to say that yeah, I totally get Simon's whole like, all right, we're just gonna just jump right in, lads. Like, let's go. Like, is this a trap? Maybe we'll find out. Like, oh boy, that resonates with me a little bit too much. I don't usually pause to take a moment to reflect on this before the chapter ends, but dear God, do I understand that to a fucking T? It's a problem. Okay, let's continue. Oh God. Oh man, that was just too great. That's just too wonderful. Okay. The punt wobbled, and Baz recovered his cool stance. Have you talked to her? Have you talked to anyone? No, Simon said. 6 hairs, is it? Yes. How many have you found so far? 4. I got. Hold on. Yeah, never mind. So you've got. So you've got the one in the cathedral and the one on the drawbridge. You know about the hair on the drawbridge? Simon sat back, startled. That took me 3 weeks to find. It doesn't surprise me, Baz said. You're not very observant. Do you even know my first name? He started to push them through the water again, pushing them towards the dock, Simon hoped. It begins with a T. It's Tyrannus, Baz said, honestly. So, the cathedral, the drawbridge, and the nursery. Simon clambered to his feet, pulling himself up by Baz's cloak. The punt bobbed. The nursery? Baz lowered an eyebrow. Of course. This close, Simon could see the purple bruises under Baz's eyes, the web of dark blood vessels in his eyelids. Show me. Baz shrugged, practically shuddered away from Simon, out of the boat. Simon jerked forward and grabbed a post on the dock to keep the boat from floating away. Come on, Baz said. Kath realized that she was starting to do Kath realized that she'd started doing Simon and Bob's voices, at least doing the version of their voices that she'd heard in her head. She glanced over at Levi to see if he noticed. He was holding his cup with both his hands, with both his hands against his chest and resting his chin on top like it was keeping him warm. His eyes were open but unfocused. He looked like a little kid watching TV. Kath turned back to her computer before he caught her watching him. It took longer to put the boat it took longer to put the boat away than it had to get it out, and by the time it was tied up, Simon's hands were wet and freezing. They hurried back into the fortress side by side, both of them pushing their fists into their pockets. Baz was taller, but their strides matched exactly. Simon wondered whether they'd ever walked like this before. In 6 years of always walking in the same direction, had they ever once fallen into step? Here, Boz said, catching Simon's arm and stopping at a closed door. Simon would have walked right past this door. He must have 1,000 times. It was on the main floor, near the professor's offices. Baz tried the handle. It was locked. He pulled his wand out of his pocket and started murmuring. The door came open suddenly, almost as if the knob were reaching for Baz's pale hand. How did you do that? Simon asked. Baz just sneered and strode forward. Simon followed. The room was dark, but he could see that it was a place for children. There were toys and pillows and tracks that wound around the room in every direction. What is this place? It's a nursery, Baz said in a hushed voice, as if children might be sleeping in the room right now. Why does Watford need a nursery? It doesn't, Baz said. Not anymore. It's too dangerous here now for children. This used to be a place where the faculty brought their children while they worked, and the other magical children could come too, if they wanted to get an early start on their development. Did you come here? Yes, from the time I was born. Your parents must have thought you needed a lot of extra help. My mother was the headmistress, you idiot. Simon turned to look at Baz. He couldn't quite see the other boy's face in the dark. I didn't know that. He could hear Baz roll his eyes. Shocking. But I've met your mother. You've met my stepmother, Baz said. He stood very still. Simon matched the stillness. The last headmistress, he said, watching Baz's profile, before the mage came, the one who was killed by vampires. Baz's head fell forward like it was weighted with stones. Come on, the hair's this way. The next room was wide and round. Cribs lined the walls on each side, with small, low futons placed in a circle in the middle. At the far end was a huge fireplace, half as tall as the high curved ceiling. Baz whispered into his hands and sent a ball of fire blazing through the grate. He whispered again, twisting his hand in the air, and the blue flames turned orange and hot. The room came to life a bit around them. Baz walked towards the fireplace, holding his hands up to the heat. Simon followed. There it is, Baz said. Where? Simon looked into the fire. Above you. Simon looked up and then turned back to face the room. On the ceiling above him was a richly painted mural of the night sky. The sky was deep blue and dominated by the moon. A white rabbit curled tightly in on itself, eyes pressed closed, fat and full and fast asleep. Simon walked out into the middle of the room, his chin raised high. The fifth hair, he whispered. The moon rabbit. Now what? Baz asked, just behind him. What do you mean? I mean, now what? I don't know, Simon said. Well, what did you do when you found the others? Nothing, I just found them. The letter just said to find them. Baz brought his hands to his face and growled, dropping into a frustrated heap on the floor. Is this how you and your dream team normally operate? It's no wonder it's always so easy to get in your way. But not so easy to stop us, I've noticed. Oh, shut up, Baz said, his face hidden in his knees. Just No more. No more of your drippy voice until you've got something worth saying. It's like a drill you're cranking between my eyes. Simon sat down on the floor near Baz, near the fire, looking up at his sleeping white rabbit. When his neck started to cramp, he leaned back on the rug. I sleep in a room like this, Simon said, in the orphanage. Nowhere near this nice. There was no fireplace, no moon rabbit, but we all slept together like this in one room. Crowley, Snow, uh, was was that when you joined the cast of Annie? There are still places like that, orphanages. You wouldn't know. Quite right, Baz said. My mother didn't choose to leave me. If your family is so grand, why are you celebrating Christmas with me? I wouldn't call this a celebration. Simon focused again on the rabbit. Maybe there was something hidden in it. Maybe if he squinted or if he looked at it in the mirror, Agatha had a magic mirror. It would tell you if something was amiss, like if you had spinach in your teeth or something hanging from your nose. When Simon looked at it, it always asked him, uh, oh, sorry. When Simon looked at it, it always asked him who he was kidding. It's just jealous, Agatha would say. It thinks I give you too much attention. It was my choice, Baz said, breaking the silence. I didn't want to go home for Christmas. He leaned back onto the floor, at arm's length from Simon. When Simon glanced over, Baz was staring up at the painted stars. Were you here? Simon asked, watching the light from the fire play across Baz's strong features. His nose was all wrong. Simon had always had always thought it started too high, with a soft bump between Baz's eyebrows. If Simon looked at Baz's face for too long, he always wanted to reach up and tug his nose down. Not that it would work, it was just a feeling. Was I here when, Baz asked, when they attacked your mother? They attacked the nursery, Baz said, as if he were explaining it to the moon. Vampires can't have children, you know. They have to turn them. They thought if they turned magical children, they'd be twice as dangerous. They would be, Simon thought, his stomach flopping fearfully. Vampires were already near invulnerable. A vampire who could do magic? My mother came to protect us. To protect you, Simon said. She threw fire at the vampires, said. They went up like flash paper. How did she die? There were just too many of them. He was still talking to the sky, but his eyes were closed. Did the vampires turn any of the children? Yes. It was like a puff of smoke escaping Baz's lips. Simon didn't know what to say. He thought it might be worse in a way to have a mother, a powerful, loving mother, and then to lose her, than to grow up like Simon had, with nothing. He knew what happened next in Baz's story. After the headmistress, Baz's mother, was killed, the mage took over. The school changed. It had to. They weren't just students now. They were warriors. Of course, the nursery had closed. When you came to Watford, you left your school. You left your childhood behind. All right. For Simon, he had nothing. Nah, all right for Simon, he had nothing to lose. But for Baz, he lost his mother. Simon thought, and he got me instead. In a hiccup of tenderness, or perhaps pity, Simon reached for Baz's hand, fully expecting Baz to yank his arm from its socket. But Baz's hand was cold and limp. When Simon looked closer, he realized that the other boy was asleep. The door flew open, and for once Kath thought Reagan's timing was perfect. Kath closed her laptop to let Levi know she was done reading. Hey, Reagan said. Oh, hey, Christmas cups. Did you bring me a gingerbread latte? Kath looked down guiltily at her cup. I brought you an eggnog latte, Levi said, holding it out, and I've been keeping it warm in my mouth. Eggnog. Reagan wrinkled her nose, but she took it. What are you doing here so early? I thought we could study before the party, Levi said. Jacob have I loved? He nodded. You're reading Jacob have I loved? Kath asked. That's a kid's book. Young adult literature, he said. It's a great class. Reagan was shoving clothes in her bag. I'm taking a shower at your place, she said. I'm so goddamn sick of public showers. Levi scooted forward on Cass's bed and laid an eyebrow on her desk. So, is this how Baz became a vampire? When the nursery was attacked? Cass wished he wouldn't talk about this in front of Reagan. You mean for real? I mean in the books. There is no nursery in the books, Cass said. But in your version, that's how it happens. Just in this story. Every story is a little different. And other people have their versions too? Oh yeah, she said. They're all these fans and we're all doing something different. Are you the only one who writes about Baz and Simon falling in love? Kath laughed. Oh, no, the entire internet writes about Baz and Simon. If you go to Google and type in Baz and Simon, the first search is to suggest Baz and Simon in love. How many people do this? Write Simon/Baz or write Simon Snow fanfiction? Write fanfiction. God, I don't know, thousands and thousands. So if you didn't want the books to be over, you could just keep reading Simon Snow stories forever online. Exactly, Cass said earnestly. She thought Levi must be judging her, but he got it. If you fall in love with the world of mages, you can just keep on living there. I wouldn't call that living, Reagan said. It was a metaphor, Levi said gently. I'm ready, Reagan said. Are you coming, Kath? Kath smiled tightly and shook her head. Are you sure? Levi asked, lifting himself off her bed. We could come back for you later. No, that's okay. See you tomorrow. As soon as they left, Kath headed down to eat dinner by herself. Maybe I'm not supposed to have a wand. Maybe I'm supposed to have a ring like you, or a wrist thingy like mangy old Elspeth. Oh, Simon, Penelope frowned. You shouldn't call her that. She can't help but for her father was the king, the witch king of Canis. No, I know. It's easier for the rest of us, she said, soothing. Magicians, instruments, uh, magicians' instruments stay in the families. They're passed down from generation to generation. Right, you said, just like magic. It doesn't make sense, Penelope. My parents must have been magicians. He tried to talk to her about this before, and that time it had made her look just sad. Simon, they couldn't have been. Magicians would never abandon their own child. Never. Magic is too precious. Simon looked away from her and flicked his wand again. It felt like something dead in his hands. I think Elspeth's fur is pretty, Penelope said. She looked soft. He shoved the wand into his pocket and stood up. You just want a puppy. From chapter 21, Simon Snow and the Third Gate, copyright 2004 by Gemma T. Leslie. All right. I'm going to have a stopping point to be there. I will probably do some more reading today, but I like to keep these videos about this length, in length in total. So it's usually, I think about like what, 2 chapters per video is what I usually get through outside of like the very first one. I think there was a couple where I might have gotten 3 chapters, but the chapters vary in length. So anyway, I'm rambling. There's no space to ramble right now. The only thing that I'll say is I'm not really a big fan of how my hair came out today, but that's just an ongoing issue. I should probably get it cut. But anyway, thank you for joining me, and I will see you shortly.